Hello. In today's session, we're going to review Turbot's Azure controls, and we'll demo it through our Turbot console and showcase some of our features, some activity happening in real time, and our CIS overlays looking at Azure control adherence. The Turbot console here is one of many ways to interact with Turbot. We're a GraphQL API backend, so any information that you're going to see here in the GUI or the console could be queried or mutated from an API. We're also a provider with Terraform, so you can also interact with Turbot through Terraform as well. In today's session, we'll just go through the Turbot console. Before I get started, just also call out that Turbot can be integrated with one or many directories, so anything SAML or LDAP based. I'm going to personally log in here with my Google authentication, so my turbot.com credentials. I already did MFA this morning, so I'm just going to hop right back into my session. But any provider, any directory provider that you integrate with Turbot would lean into the MFA that you have set up with that provider. Now, when I authenticate in as myself here, I land into a homepage that showcases my control summary across multi-cloud. I can also see some favorited parts of my hierarchy, quick wins to simply log into my an Amazon or Azure or Google account project subscription. But I'll talk first about the hierarchy within Turbot. And so here I just jumped into a folder called Lee's Demo Account. And folders within Turbot give you the ability to set up an organizational hierarchy, whether it's based off of business units or environment types or cloud providers, or really it's completely defined by the customer. Think of it like folders on your computer. You could set up n number of folders, subfolders, and then what you're associating to those folders are cloud accounts. And so in this example, I have multiple clouds within this one structure. That's then part of a broader organizational structure with multiple different folders. And if I go to a different one here, there's other Azure subscriptions, Google projects, Amazon accounts. Within that, I can drill in. So specifically on Azure for this video, is I can then look at my Azure subscription. I could see the resources that are at the global tier, the providers that are registered, and then I can drill into my resource groups. So in this case, I'm drilling into a dev resource group, and then I could see the components within that. And this, whatever level I'm at within the hierarchy, I can always see my activities, my controls, policies that are set at that level or below, and the resources that are within. And so as an example, just looking at and browsing this resource hierarchy, if I go to my resources tab, I could see all the resources that live within that resource group, and I could see the types of resources. I can look at them specifically and filter, and then I could drill down even further to look at, let's say, my network components and my NSGs and network interface, my VNets, etc. And that's the same use case regardless of where I am in the hierarchy. I'm going to have that same type of view. So if I went up to the subscription level, now I'm going to see a broader set of resources because it's looking across the sub, not just that one resource group. Or if I went up to the sales organization, now I'm looking at all of my components. If I drill back down to Azure, and then I could see a broader list of resources across all of those subscriptions as part of this organizational structure. And so this gives you the ability to browse your inventory, but probably more importantly is to see that inventory and how well it's adhering to policy. So the adherence of your controls. And so whether that be in a external perspective of like security benchmarks like CIS, you could take a look to see how you're adhering to CIS controls across different components, like for example, like your storage. So section 3 of that report, and looking maybe specifically at section 301. And here I'm still filtered on that sales organization, looking at Azure CIS version 1 of those controls. And I could see all my storage accounts that are impacted by this section 301. If I wanted to get a feel for what those resources are, I can just group by resource type and see these are storage accounts that are associated to section 301. If I wanted to take a broader look to see how does this Section 301 relates to CIS controls version 7, which is a broader framework. I could see that actually aligns to section 1404 to encrypt sensitive information in transit. And so a lot of easy ways to manipulate and filter the view here so that you can get to the information that you're looking for. And so here I could just drill down into one particular example where I had this Bob demo AZ storage just created on July 2nd, 2020. And so I could see the history of how that's been moving from when it first was created, and then it alarmed because encryption in transit wasn't in place. Turbot had alarmed and then moved it to OK because it corrected the issue. And so within Turbot, you can set policies that will prevent issues from happening, but also correct them in real time. And so drilling all the way down to this particular storage account, I could see the raw CMDB entry of even things down to allowing public access on blob storage, to what the access tier configurations are, what kind of storage it is, etc. And so I could see all the configurations simply at my fingertips, but then also pulling out some key information like the tags, other comparisons around that storage account. I could see my audit trail. And so in this example here, later on after the bucket was created, Bob had come in and looks like he removed one of the key value pairs of department equals sales and changed it to department equals marketing. Well, Turbot didn't, because the policies are set up, it didn't like that the tags weren't set correctly, so it alarmed, but then updated the tags, and the CMDB was updated along the way so that I could see exactly what then Turbot did to remove that marketing key value pair and replace it with with department sales. And then Turbot verified that everything was okay. And so this is all happening within quick workflow to verify or to detect any changes in the environment, then evaluate what's wrong with that change. And so this might have been an okay change, but in this case it was not, so it moved to alarm. And then if Turbot is set to enforce mode, we would then update the tags in this example, update the CMDB, and then verify everything's okay. And that's essentially what's happening for any type of resource, whether it's network security groups or it's an Amazon like S3 bucket or a Google storage bucket. Regardless of the cloud provider or service, Turbot's in this real-time discovery, evaluation, and then a correction, or at least a reporting and a correction, depending on how your policies are set. And so even here, looking at other changes that had happened, like Bob here had updated the storage account to remove encryption in transit. Turbot then set that back, and then things moved to an okay state, even for section 301 there of the CIS report, and also the policy here to enforce encryption in transit. And so all this is happening real time. The overlays with CIS are in real time. From a reporting standpoint, the CMDB is updated immediately. And Turbot just takes care of that change over time. So just in the life of this storage account, just of this morning, there's been 106 activities that have happened since its life cycle. And so just going all the way back to its inception, so a lot of activity had happened here. And so here when Bob created the storage account, it captured that creation, and then it started evaluating that creation and setting policies and orienting itself on the conditions of that environment. And so there might be conditions that, based on the region or based on the actor who created this resource, or if it has certain tagging configurations on it, that might dictate different policies that you set, and then Turbot reacts. So Turbot will orient and calculate the policies that need to be enforced. It'll then start running the controls and then start alarming or marking things okay. So there's a number of things that were wrong with this bucket, and then over time things were getting corrected. Users are making changes, Turbot's evaluating and then correcting. So like things like the access tier, or encryption, or tags, etc. So from a policy standpoint, let's just go back to Lee's account. So I'm just going to remove some of the filters here, going to go back into that subscription, and a couple different ways to set policies. So here I'm back on my subscription, looking at my controls. I could go to the policies tab and start setting policies from here. I could set policies directly on a resource instead of it being on a higher level. So for example, I could just go directly to that bucket that we were just looking at. And so just a fuzzy quick find right here, I'm able to quickly look up that Bob demo AZ storage that was created. And now I'm positioned right onto that particular resource, and very similar to the screens before, even down to a particular storage account, I could see the CMDB entry and the overview, the activity, the controls particular to this resource, as well as the policies. And so the policies, I'll just pick one, simple one, access tier. And so now I've drilled into a very particular storage account policy called access tier. So whether you move to hot or cold or cool. And so I have looking at this Bob storage account overlaid with the access tier policy. And so I could see that on the sales organization, I'm enforcing this policy that inherits all the way down the hierarchy. So here I have it at the sales org. It's inheriting down to these demo folder, the subscription, the resource group that this resource sits in, and then this particular resource. So when I created this storage account, Turbot then evaluated based on the policy above, as an ancestor above this descendant. It calculated that it must enforce a hot tier onto that storage account. And so nothing was done to set it after the bucket was created, or the storage account was created. It was just automatically inherited. But it's really easy to set policies. So if I wanted to change that logic, let's say I don't care about access tier. Well, you can simply skip access tier, and you can skip it at the individual resource level. You can also set it at different tiers of the hierarchy. So here I could say, well, maybe I skip access tier, or I just check to see if it's cool or hot, or I actually do the enforcement to enforce whether it's cool or hot, and that's exactly what the policy was. It ended up enforcing that it's hot. And so there's different precedents that you can set. So as maybe a cloud team organization or security ops organization, you can set policies to be required, and they're mandated down the hierarchy, and then your application teams have to come to you for exceptions to the rule. You can also recommend defaults. So you can, maybe in lower environments, you could say, well, I just recommend that things are set to hot, but you can change it as you see fit. And there you can annotate why you're setting the policy or why you're setting an exception. You can also expire those policies on set period of times or a custom period of time. And so it gives you really simple user interface to be very powerful in that policy setting, enforcement, mandates across your environment. Now, there's more there's more types of policies that can be set. And so here within the actual policy that's set is an advanced view. So simply you can say skip, check, enforce. But we also have this advanced calculated mode that can set conditions on the resource. And so in this example, it's running a GraphQL query to pull in some variable information from the CMDB. So it's saying for the storage account name and the tags, I'm going to bring that down into a template that in this particular example, it's saying if the storage account name starts with Bob demo AZ temp, then enforce cool on the access tier. Or if it has that name, or if it has this tag called test temp, then also enforce cool. But if it doesn't meet those conditions, then enforce it to be hot tier. And so any type of if-else statements, you can look up and correlate other information from different resources to make then the decision or calculate the reasoning for what the policy might be. And so it becomes a very powerful conditional logic that you can set on top of our pre-canned policies for this type of control. So in this example, because it didn't meet those conditions, that's why it enforced hot in this particular storage account. Now, the other way to set policies in the environment, and so we have these pre-can policies that you could set, which you saw, they're pre-can, skip, check, enforce. We support hundreds of cloud services. We have thousands of policies that are already out of the box. You saw those calculated policies where you could set conditions wrapped around it for your nuances. But we also have a way to set policies with your Terraform stacks. And so those Terraform stacks, you can set very similar to the way that you would set policies there. You can also set your Terraform HCL code as a policy, and Turbot will enforce those Terraform stacks across your environment. And so in this example, I'm just going to show a stack that's already set up where I have this particular stack that's deploying. Go to this view here. So I have this stack that's deploying across my resource groups in this subscription, and it's deploying it across each resource group. It's deploying an NSG with this particular name across the location of the resource group. So it's looking up the resource group location and also bringing that down into the logic. So this is just a variable from the CMDB. And in this example, it's just pure Terraform of setting that particular security rule for an ingress or an egress, and then tagging it, and etc. So it's all Terraform out of the box that you can set. And so here I've set that Terraform stack, and then it deployed it across all of my resource groups. And so as an example, just recently, what I've changed here was, and I could see this diff history of my stack changes. So here I changed the network security group priority to, instead of 101, I changed it to 102. And then Turbot then configured all of the stacks across. And so if I just look up a Turbot NSG Terraform network security group, and I'll just pick one within the dev tier, the dev resource group, I can see the activity of what had happened. So as Bob set that policy, Turbot came in and then updated that security group. And so this is an example where it updated that security group from changing the priority from 101 to 102, and then everything's okay. And so your Terraform stack actually just becomes the policy that's being enforced. And the great thing about this type of configuration is that even if someone came in outside of the pipeline, so if they were directly in the Azure portal, Turbot would also then take action to correct it. And so as an example here, this is Bob here had made changes directly against that network security group, and then Turbot came in and then corrected the resource based on your Terraform stack. And so essentially Turbot's managing state of your stack, so it doesn't matter how deployments or changes are occurring, Turbot's going to react just like our general guardrails, but in this case it's based off of your Terraform configurations that Turbot's enforcing. So I'll also show some additional features around our permission model. And so I'll just go up to this account structure, and I'll just talk about permissions as well. So Turbot's also an identity engine, so we can help enforce role-based access controls, or RBAC, across your multi-cloud environment. So specifically for Azure, we very similar role definitions to Amazon and Google and other scopes, where you have consistent logic on who are admins or power users or operators, read-only, or just metadata views of your environment. And so very consistent role definitions agnostically across each cloud provider, but also per service. So an Azure storage account admin would have very similar risk profile and rights as a Amazon S3 admin. So we help keep that consistent logic with RBAC controls that can get deployed across your subscription. So completely optional to use what we have out of the box, but also gives you the ability to modify our logic as well as bring in your own custom roles, and then Turbot can manage them. And so regardless if you're using what we have out of the box or if you're bringing in your role or you're modifying something in between, Turbot provides a very simple interface to associate multi-cloud role-based access controls. And so here, this is an example where Bob, coming in from this Google authentication directory, I have rights across many different layers of my hierarchy with Turbot permissions, like Turbot has its own role-based access controls, Amazon, Azure, Google. In this case, I'm an Azure owner as well as an Azure super user. But if I wanted to add additional permissions in the environment, so let's say I wanted to add Cody from the directory and I wanted to give him Azure admin rights to this particular hierarchy, I could simply look up the user. We also integrate with groups, so you can look up the group. You can also then assign the role-based access control. You can activate that for immediate use, so deploy that immediately, or you can choose to expire it at any point in time. So you might end up giving out rights to Cody here for Azure admin, activating that now for immediate use, and then expire that within a certain time frame. So there's pre-canned and then there's custom logic. And so Turbot can be used for time-based role-based access controls. With activating now or later, that allows you to pre-approve roles in the environment. So in this use case, I might say Cody's pre-approved to be an Azure admin, not activated now, but he's going to have pre-approval for the next 72 hours to activate it within that window. And so there's these different combinations of identity management that Turbot can also help you manage, but completely optional for how you can leverage Turbot in that regard. So that's the end of today's session. Feel free to reach out to us at turbot.com/connect, and we'd be happy to handle a curated demo for you. Thank you.